The greatest elven city of the First Age was not conquered by armies from without, but was sold from within by one of its own. This act of treason was not born of a lust for power, but from a dark, possessive love for his own cousin. An obsession so profound, it makes the story of Romeo and Juliet seem a tale of simple affection, for this love would be paid for with the annihilation of an entire civilization. This is the chronicle of Maeglin, son of the Dark Elf. It is a story of how the brightest hope of the elves was extinguished not by the fire of a dragon, but by the cold bitterness of a single, broken heart. To understand how a prince could become a traitor, we must first understand the shadows in which he was raised. We must travel to the haunted forest of Nan Elmoth. In the twilight of the First Age, long after the High Elves had returned to Middle-earth, a deep disquiet settled upon Eredhel, the White Lady of the Noldor. She was the sister of Turgon, the future king of Gondolin, and she was filled with the wild, untamed spirit of her people. The ordered life within her brother's cities could not contain her. She yearned for the open lands, for the thrill of the hunt, and the freedom of the wide world. Against her brother's counsel, she rode forth. Her journey led her far astray, until she became lost in the unsettling woods of Nan Elmoth. This was no ordinary forest. It was the domain of Eol, known as the Dark Elf. He was of the kin of the Teleri, but he had long ago forsaken his people, preferring the deep shadows of the woods to the light of the Valar. He was a master smith, his craft rivaling that of the dwarves with whom he often dealt. Ixol was not welcoming. He had enchanted his woods so that any who entered would become lost, wandering until they arrived at his halls. And so it was with Eredhel. He saw her, a brilliant white flame in the gloom of his domain, and he desired her. He did not court her with grace, but ensnared her with his power. She became his wife, though it is said she was not wholly unwilling, for his mystery and mastery of his craft intrigued her restless spirit. Yet, the price of this union was her freedom. Esiol forbade her from ever again seeking the sunlight, or her Noldoran kin. In this gilded cage of shadows, a son was born. They named him Maeglin, which in the Elven tongue means sharp glance, for his eyes were piercing and seemed to read the secrets of hearts. From his father, he inherited a love for the forge and a brooding, secretive nature. From his mother he inherited the fair face of the Noldor and a deep, burning curiosity for the world beyond the forest. He grew tall and strong, his skill in smithing becoming so great that it was whispered he might one day surpass his father. But as Maeglin toiled in the darkness of Eol's forges, his mother, Eredhel, would tell him tales of her people. She spoke of the light of Valinor, of the grand kinship of the Noldor, and of the magnificent, hidden city of Gondolin, ruled by her brother, the High King Turgon. A fire was lit in Maeglin's heart. He yearned to see these things, to meet his uncle, to stand among the princes of the Noldor and be counted among them. This desire became a deep chasm between him and his father. Elul hated the Noldor with a cold and ancient passion, blaming them for the wars that had ravaged the land. But what happens when a child is forged in shadow, yearning for a light he has only heard of in whispers, a light his own father despises? The tension festered for years. Maeglin openly defied his father, declaring his intent to see his Noldoran kin. Eredhel, seeing the fire of her own spirit rekindled in her son, chose to go with him. While Ecuel was away visiting his dwarven allies in the Blue Mountains, mother and son fled the gloom of Nan Elmoth, riding hard for the secret passes that led to Gondolin. They found the hidden way, and were brought before the throne of Turgon. The king's joy at the return of his long-lost sister was immense, and in Maeglin, he saw not the shadow of the dark elf, but the bright lineage of his own house. The young elf was tall and fair, his face beardless and noble, his words wise and respectful. He was welcomed with great honor. Maeglin looked upon the White City, with its soaring towers and silver fountains, and was utterly enchanted. This, he thought, was his true home. In Gondolin, Maeglin's status and skills grew. He was a prince of the royal house, and his mastery of smithing and mining was beyond any in the city. He learned the arts of war, proving himself a capable and fearless captain. He gathered followers who were eager to learn from him, delving into the mountains to find rich veins of ore. He forged weapons of incredible strength and hardness, strengthening the city's already formidable defenses. For a time he was a celebrated hero, a lost son returned to his glory. He had found his home, his kin, his purpose. So what could possibly transform this celebrated prince into the architect of its destruction? The answer stood beside the king's throne. Her name was Idril Celebrindal, Turgon's only child, his daughter and heir. She was called Silverfoot, for she loved to walk barefoot, and her beauty was like the dawning of a new day. Her hair was gold, like the Vanyar, her mother's people, and her wisdom was deep and far-seeing. And upon seeing her, his first cousin, Maeglin's heart was utterly snared. But his love was not gentle. It was a dark, possessive fire, a shadow brought from the woods of Nan Elmoth. He desired her completely, and his gaze followed her everywhere. Elven law forbade the marriage of first cousins, but this law meant little to Maeglin's burning heart. Yet Idril did not return his affection. In fact, his intense stare filled her with a strange unease. She saw a darkness in him, a shadow of the possessiveness of his father, and she turned away from him. Maeglin's unrequited love began to curdle into a quiet bitterness. His joy in Gondolin faded, replaced by a brooding frustration. The city he loved became a cage, for it held the one thing he wanted but could never have. All his achievements, all his praise, felt hollow. He concealed his torment behind a mask of diligence, working harder in the forges, leading more expeditions into the mountains. But his heart grew colder. His quiet suffering might have remained just that, a private tragedy. But fate was not so kind. One day, a stranger was brought to the gates of Gondolin. He was not an elf, but a man, tall and mighty, with sea-gray eyes. His name was Tur, and he came as a messenger from Ulmo, the Vala of the waters, with a grave warning for King Turgon. Tur was welcomed into the city. He was noble of heart and powerful of limb, and he quickly won the admiration of its people and the favor of the king. And he won the heart of Idril Celebrindal. Where Maeglin's love was a possessive shadow, Tur's was a bright and open flame. Idril, who had been disturbed by her cousin's dark gaze, found peace and joy in the company of the mortal man. And King Turgon, seeing the greatness in Tur and the love between him and his daughter, broke with all tradition. He blessed their union. The marriage of an elf and a man was a thing of wonder, only the second such union in history. But for Maeglin, it was the end of all hope. It was a personal insult, a public humiliation. That Idril, a high princess of the Noldor, should be given to a mortal man, a member of a lesser, short-lived race, was an outrage beyond comprehension. His love, already twisted, now became a venomous hatred, directed squarely at Tur. Every ounce of his bitterness, jealousy, and pride focused on this one man who had effortlessly won what he had so desperately craved. For in the heart of the most brilliant elven city, a mortal man had just become a king's favored son, and in doing so he had signed the death warrant for an entire civilization. The only question was, who would deliver it? Maeglin's work in the mines became his only solace, a place where he could channel his rage into the striking of rock and metal. He began to flout the king's law, which forbade any from leaving the hidden valley. He would take his most loyal followers on secret expeditions far into the mountains, seeking new veins of ore, but truly seeking an escape from the sight of Idril and Tubor. He pushed his followers to take greater and greater risks, venturing further than was wise. It was on one such forbidden journey, high in the mountains north of the city, that his fate found him. A sudden storm forced him and his companions to take shelter. They were isolated, far from the protection of Gondolin's secret guards, and they were being watched. A patrol of orcs, scouts of Morgoth, had seen them from afar. They crept through the rocks, silent and deadly, masters of ambush in the high passes. The attack was swift and merciless. Maeglin's companions fought bravely, but they were outnumbered and caught by surprise. One by one they fell. Maeglin, a prince of the Noldor and a mighty warrior, fought with the fury of despair, his dark sword a blur of motion. But it was not enough. He was overwhelmed, beaten down, and bound. As the orcs dragged him away, bruised and defeated, he had one last glimpse of the distant, hidden peaks that shielded Gondolin. He was dragged for days through the labyrinthine tunnels of the orcs, a journey into the bowels of the earth and into the heart of despair. His pride, the fierce pride of the Noldor, was all he had left. But what good is pride against the endless dark? He was brought at last to the hell forges of Angband, the fortress of Morgoth. Here, the air was thick with smoke and the cries of the tormented, and the very rock pulsed with a deep and ancient evil. And there, Maeglin was brought before the Dark Lord himself, Morgoth, the prime enemy of elves and men, who sat upon his throne like a mountain of shadow and malice. Now you might think the story is simple. A hero is captured, tortured, and breaks. But Maeglin's fall was far more insidious than that. Did Morgoth simply use pain to extract the location of Gondolin? Oh, he tried. Maeglin endured torments that would have shattered the minds of lesser beings. His Noldoran blood gave him immense strength of will. He would not betray his city, not for any pain they could inflict upon his body. But Morgoth, the master of lies, saw a different path to victory. He saw the rot already in Maeglin's heart. He stopped the physical torture and instead began to whisper into the darkness of Maeglin's mind. He spoke not of Gondolin's location, but of Maeglin's grievances. He spoke of the injustice of it all, how a great smith and prince like Maeglin was overlooked, how his rightful place was usurped by a mortal, an upstart man. He painted a picture of Tuor, not as a hero, but as a thief, who had stolen Idril, the jewel that should have been Maeglin's. And then Morgoth made his offer. It was not a demand. It was a deal, a partnership. Why should Maeglin die to protect a city that had scorned him? A king who had denied him? Why protect the happiness of the man he hated most in the world? Morgoth promised him everything. "Betray Gondolin to me," the Dark Lord whispered. "And when I have taken the city, I will kill Tuor, and I will give you Idril. You will be my vassal, the Lord of Gondolin under my rule, with the woman you desire as your prize." What is loyalty against a lifetime of bitterness? What is honor against the promise of your heart's darkest desire? For Maeglin, the choice was a torment far greater than any fire. To save his people and lose everything? Or to betray them and gain his twisted prize? In the black pits of Angband, Maeglin's soul finally broke. His love, curdled into obsession, became the key to his damnation. He agreed. He told Morgoth everything. The exact location of the hidden city, the disposition of its 7 gates, the strength of its armies, and the secret paths used by its sentinels. In exchange for his soul, he purchased his vengeance. And then, in a stroke of terrifying cunning, Morgoth let him go. Maeglin was found by the guards of Gondolin, seemingly having escaped the clutches of the orcs by his own might and valor. He returned a hero. He told a tale of a desperate fight and a daring flight from captivity, and all in the city praised his courage and endurance. All, except Tuor, a man wise beyond his years, felt a shadow of falsehood in Maeglin's tale. And Idril, with the keen sight of the Eldar, saw not a hero return from the brink, but a darkness in her cousin's eyes that had not been there before. It was a chilling emptiness, a void where his fiery bitterness used to be. Maeglin was now a serpent, coiled in the heart of the last great elven kingdom. He walked their streets, worked in their forges, and sat in their councils, all while carrying the city's doom within him. He played his part perfectly, becoming more dutiful, more helpful than ever, allaying any suspicions. But he was waiting for the signal, waiting for the day his new master would come to collect his prize. And Idril, filled with a nameless dread, began a secret work of her own. Unbeknownst to even her father the king, she began to prepare a hidden tunnel, a secret way out of the city, leading down from her own house and under the plains. She did not know why. She only knew that the peace of Gondolin was a lie, and that a storm was about to break. The waiting ended during the great festival of the Gates of Summer. When all of Gondolin was filled with joy and light, a new light appeared in the north. Not the dawn, but a river of fire. The sky bled red as Morgoth's armies, guided by Maeglin's treachery, descended upon the hidden valley. The surprise was absolute. The calamity? Swift. Iron dragons, great mechanical beasts filled with orc warriors, were driven against the city gates. Behind them came the Balrogs, demons of shadow and flame, their whips cracking like thunder. The valiant elves of Gondolin fought with the courage of the doomed, their silver armor stained with black blood. But while the greatest heroes of the city fought and died in the maelstrom, Maeglin made his move. He cared not for the battle, only for his prize. With a handful of his most trusted smiths, he fought his way through the chaos, not to the walls, but to the house of Tuor, to seize Idril and her young son, Arundel. He seized the boy, his grip like iron. "The city falls," he hissed at Idril, "but you will be mine, as was always meant to be." But as his men held Idril back, a great cry echoed from the street. Tuor, his axe Dramberleg dripping with black blood, had arrived. The rage of a husband and a father was upon him, and it was terrible to behold. The fight was short and brutal, a desperate clash of hatred and love amidst the ruins of their home. It spilled out onto the high walls of the city as the battle raged below. There, with the world burning around them, Tuor and Maeglin fought their final duel. Maeglin, for all his dark strength, was no match for the wrath of the Man of the West. "She was mine!" Maeglin shrieked, his voice filled with a lifetime of poison. Tuor said nothing. He simply cast the traitor out and down. Maeglin's body fell, striking the rocky slopes of the hill, before plunging into the very fires he had brought upon his own people. His dark end was to be consumed by the flames of his own treachery. But the city was lost. In the great square, Ecthelion of the Fountain dueled Gothmog, Lord of Balrogs, and they slew each other, falling together into the king's fountain with a great hiss of steam. The fall of Gondolin was at hand. It was then that Tuor, finding Idril, gathered the few survivors and led them to the secret way she had prepared. They escaped into the mountains as their home, the last great beacon of the Noldor in Middle-earth, was utterly destroyed. They looked back one last time to see only a pillar of smoke and fire rising to the heavens, marking the grave of the hidden city. It was an ending of profound sorrow, and yet it was not the end. For among the refugees was the child Arundel, son of a mortal man and an elven princess, carrying in his veins the blood of both races and the hope of a world drowning in shadow. His journey was just beginning. The fall of Gondolin was not the final chapter, but the terrible, beautiful crucible that would forge the savior of the age to come. The First Age is filled with such tales of sorrow and of hope, of monumental betrayals and unshakable courage. The story of Arundel, the forging of the Silmarils, and the final, cataclysmic war of wrath are yet to be told. To ensure you don't miss a single moment of this epic saga, subscribe to the _Silmarillion_Chronicles, and let the great tales